Okay, so before we start our science lesson for today, let's do our self check-in. Let's see. So I am in the green zone because it means I am happy and I'm ready to learn. So what zone are you
The green zone,
in? Why are you in the green zone?
because I'm happy and ready to learn.
Okay, so since you're happy and you're ready to learn, read our learning objectives, please.
Students will define an aquatic ecosystem. Students will identify living, biotic, and non-living, abiotic components in an aquatic ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Students will distinguish between freshwater and saltwater ecosystems.
Mm-hmm.
And students will build and explain a simple model of an aquatic ecosystem.
Good job. So number 2 states students will identify living, biotic, and non-living abiotic components in an aquatic ecosystem. So what are some biotic components of an ecosystem?
Some biotic components are plants, animals, and bacteria.
Okay, so when we look at food chain, what do we call the plants in the food chain?
Producers,
Plants are called producers. Why are they called producers?
because they make their own food.
And what about the animals? What are they called in the food chain?
Consumers,
Same question. Why are they consumers?
because they depend on plants and other animals for their food.
Okay. And you mentioned bacteria. What do we call bacteria?
Decomposers,
Okay. What's the function of decomposers?
to break down the waste and remains of animals and return it back to the soil.
Okay. And what about abiotic components? What are some examples of abiotic components?
Some examples are water, sunlight, and air.
Okay. Good job. So today we will be exploring an amazing ecosystem. But before we go into our ecosystem, let's recap what we've learned over the past weeks. So, do you remember what is an ecosystem?
An ecosystem is a place where living and non-living things work together.
Good. So, we know that an ecosystem is a place where living and non-living things work together, right? And what are some of the type of ecosystem that we looked at?
We looked at the land or terrestrial ecosystem.
And what are some examples of, like, at least give me 2 examples of land or terrestrial ecosystem?
2 examples are forest ecosystem and desert ecosystem.
Okay. Now look at the word aquatic. What is the word?
Aquatic,
Okay. So what do you think the word aquatic means? When you hear the word aquatic, what comes to mind?
water, because the word aqua means water.
Okay. So what ecosystem are we looking at today?
Aquatic ecosystem.
So today we are looking at the aquatic ecosystem, right? But before we talk about the aquatic ecosystem, let me ask you, have you ever visited an ocean or a sea, a beach, a river?
Yes.
Okay, what do you notice?
There are fishes, crabs, plants, algae.
And what do you think those living things need to survive in the water?
Food, sunlight. Well, the plants need sunlight to produce their food, and animals then depend on the plants and other animals for their food.
Okay, good. So remember, what's the ecosystem are we talking about today?
Aquatic ecosystem.
And we know that the word aquatic means what?
Water.
Okay, so can you give me a definition of an aquatic ecosystem? What is an aquatic ecosystem?
An aquatic ecosystem is a type of ecosystem found in water.
Good. So the main thing is it's an ecosystem that is found in
Water.
where is it found?
Water.
It is found in water, right? So today we will be discussing the aquatic ecosystem. So what we know so far is that aquatic ecosystem is found in water. Now there are 2 types of aquatic ecosystem. How many types of aquatic ecosystem?
2 types.
Now the 2 types of aquatic ecosystem are freshwater ecosystem Can you repeat that for me?
Freshwater ecosystem.
And the saltwater ecosystem.
Saltwater ecosystem.
Now, the saltwater ecosystem is also called the marine ecosystem. What is it also called?
The marine ecosystem.
Good. And the marine ecosystem takes up about 70% of the earth, right? So we can safely say which ecosystem is bigger, freshwater ecosystem or saltwater ecosystem?
Saltwater ecosystem.
Okay, so now what we're gonna do, we will look at a short video that will tell us some more about the different types of aquatic ecosystem. So you have to carefully look at the video, listen, pay attention, because after the video we will discuss some questions about the video, okay, based on the video.
Whoa, these guys are hungry.
I bet they miss Mia. I can't wait till she's back from Hawaii.
I know. Hey, she should bring some fish back for her tank.
That'd be cool if she could, but it'd never work. These fish are freshwater fish.
So, they can still be friends.
Sure, but the fish that live in the ocean are saltwater fish. They'd never survive in this freshwater tank.
I thought fish just needed water to survive.
All fish need water, but different fish need different places and different natural conditions in which to live. Those places and conditions are called a habitat.
So, the saltwater fish can't survive in the same habitat as the fish in this tank?
No, they can't. There are two different kinds of aquatic ecosystems, saltwater and freshwater. Saltwater fish live in the ocean. The ocean is a saltwater ecosystem. This tank is a freshwater ecosystem. Ponds, swamps, and bogs are freshwater ecosystems.
I never knew there was a difference.
The main difference between aquatic ecosystems is salt. Freshwater ecosystems are not salty. Well, freshwater has a tiny bit of salt, but not enough to make a difference. Creatures like snails, worms, and frogs live in freshwater. Plants like cattails and arrowheads grow there too.
Sounds like the swamp behind my house. Saltwater fish are so much cooler. Mia sent me a pic of one, and it was bright pink like your guitar. It had black tiger stripes and blue fins.
Saltwater fish are a lot different than freshwater fish, and so is their saltwater ecosystem. It's very salty and has different habitats or zones where different organisms live.
Like a deep end and a shallow end?
Kinda. There are three habitats or zones: intertidal, open ocean upper region, and open ocean lower region. Different organisms live in these different zones. The shallow end is the intertidal. This is where the tide comes in and out and is the top part of the water. Crabs, mussels, and barnacles live in this zone. So do plankton.
Plankton?
Plankton are organisms that float on water. They're very small, but very important. They make oxygen.
Well, what about the other zones?
Below the intertidal zone is the open ocean upper region. This is where most of the fish you know live, along with turtles, whales, and sharks. These are all called nekton. Nekton are organisms that float in water.
And then there's the bottom.
Right. The open ocean lower region is the darkest, coldest zone. Down here in the dark, there are even fish that light up. This is where the benthos live. Benthos are bottom dwellers. Eels and shrimp are benthos.
Shrimp. I love benthos. For dinner.
Deep, Sam. Deep.
Well, at least now I know the difference between saltwater and freshwater ecosystems. Saltwater ecosystems are very salty, and freshwater ecosystems are not as salty. There are different habitats in aquatic ecosystems. Each habitat is unique and is a home to different organisms.
And no matter how cool they are, saltwater fish can't live in a freshwater tank.
I know. Maybe I can paint Mia's fish. Think she'd notice?
Sam, don't even think about it.
Okay, so let's talk about our video. So, based on our video and what we discussed so far, what are the two types of aquatic ecosystem?
Saltwater ecosystem and freshwater ecosystem.
And what is another name for the saltwater ecosystem?
Marine ecosystem.
It's also called marine ecosystem. So, what did we learn from the video? What is the difference between freshwater ecosystem and saltwater ecosystem? What have you learned?
Saltwater ecosystem has a high salt content, while freshwater ecosystem has a low salt content.
Okay, so, all right. Before you continue, so the difference with the two types of ecosystem is the salt, right? So the saltwater ecosystem, or we call it the marine ecosystem, it has what? A
high salt content.
high salt content, and whereas the freshwater ecosystem, what did we learn about it?
It has a low salt content.
It has a low salt content, right? What is something else that you learned from the video about freshwater ecosystem and saltwater ecosystem?
Some examples of saltwater ecosystem are oceans and seas, and some examples of freshwater are ponds and lakes.
Okay, so we learn about different areas that can be considered saltwater ecosystem and freshwater ecosystem. So we know that the saltwater ecosystems are what? Oceans and seas, right? And we know that the saltwater ecosystem is it bigger or smaller than it's bigger than the freshwater ecosystem because it takes up what percentage of Earth?
70%.
70% of Earth, right? And also in the video, they list some animals that can be found in, I should say, living things that can be found in both ecosystems. What are some living things or some organisms that we can find in saltwater ecosystem?
You'll find crabs and mussels and whales and seaweed.
Okay, and what about the freshwater ecosystem?
Right. Snails, worms, frogs, and tiny fishes.
Okay, so can we take, let's say for example, can we take a whale and put it into a freshwater ecosystem?
No.
Okay, so what about if we take a snail? Can we take a snail and put it in a saltwater ecosystem?
No.
Good, because we know that organisms that live in freshwater ecosystem cannot survive in saltwater ecosystem, right? Now, before we move on, what we're gonna do, we will use this graphic organizer. We will use it to compare the two ecosystems. So what you will do, you will read the statement, and if it matches a characteristic of freshwater ecosystem, you put it under freshwater. If it matches the characteristic of saltwater ecosystem, you put it under that ecosystem. So you have like 2 minutes to complete that. So to do it, you take it and you drag it and put it in the appropriate circle. Let me help you. Okay. Okay, so can you read for us what do you have under freshwater ecosystem?
Under freshwater ecosystem, I have a low salt content, and you find algae and amphibians.
Okay, and what do you have under saltwater ecosystem?
Under saltwater ecosystem, I have a high salt content found in oceans and seas, and you can find seaweed and whales.
Good. So here's the fun part. So what we will do next, we will create our own. Can you go to the next slide? We will create our own sustainable ecosystem, right? So you see, so you will create your own sustainable ecosystem. So we will use an online tool to create that ecosystem. So let's talk about the word sustain. What do you think the word sustain means?
Something that can maintain itself for a long period of time.
Okay, so when we talk about sustainable, we know that it means what?
Something that can maintain itself.
Right, being able to maintain itself, right? So when it comes to aquatic ecosystem, what do you think sustainability means in an aquatic ecosystem?
Mm.
What are some things you think are necessary in an aquatic ecosystem in order to make sure it is sustainable?
Food and shelter.
Mm-hmm. And remember, we're talking about aquatic, so that shelter
and water.
would includes what?
Water.
Okay. Anything else when you think of sustainability?
It would need producers, consumers, and decomposers.
Okay, so should we have like more of one? What do you think? Should it be like more producers than consumers?
No, it should be balanced.
Okay, so tell me in a sentence, in order for an aquatic ecosystem to be sustainable, what is needed?
In order for an aquatic ecosystem to be sustainable, it would need water, shelter, food, and a balanced amount of producers, consumers, and decomposers.
Okay. Now, so remember we're going to use this online tool to create our aquatic ecosystem, right? So I will show you. How to add your organism to the ecosystem. Let's see if we can turn this to the camera. Let me reset it because I've been working on it before. So let me reset this. So, let's see. So, what you have to focus on is the carbon dioxide and oxygen level, right? So, the main goal is to maintain a balance of carbon dioxide and oxygen. So, it should not be too much or too little, right? You must maintain. So, to add the organisms to your ecosystem, because you're creating this aquatic ecosystem, so we have like different organisms here, and we know it's an aquatic ecosystem. So what's one of the main things that we need for aquatic ecosystem?
Water.
So we take our water and we add our water, so you can, this is how we add our water. Where is it? Is it? Find it for me, please. Okay, so that's how we add our water, right? So we add our water, and we can add some other non-living components to our ecosystem. What are some other non-living components that we have here?
Sand.
So we can add sand. So you can use your fingers and you add your sand, right? What else can we add? So we had our water, we add sand. So now we can add like our producers, our consumers. And remember, we have to pay attention to the level, right? So one producer that I can add is what?
Grass.
Okay, so I can put some grass. What else can I put? What's another producer I can put?
Algae.
I can put some algae. Put my algae. And then, so we have producers. What do we need? in this?
Consumers.
Good. So what are some consumers that I can put?
Fish.
Mm-hmm. So I put my fish. So now that you understand how to add the organism, right? I'll give you 10 minutes. So let me reset this, and I'll give you 10 minutes to create your own ecosystem. So remember, for it to be sustainable, there must be what? There must be a balance, right? A balance of producer, consumer, and decomposer. So you have 10 minutes to work on that. Start creating your ecosystem. After you create your ecosystem, I will ask you some questions. What did you include in your ecosystem so far?
Water, sand, and grass.
Okay. Why did you include grass?
Because grass is a producer, so it will produce food.
Okay, so you need a producer. What else did you add?
Fishes,
Okay, why?
because fishes are consumers.
Mm. So what are those fish feeding on?
The plants and algae.
Well, algae are plants.
Oh, the grass.
Mm. Grass is not a plant.
Yeah. All the fishes are feeding on plants.
All feeding on plants at the moment. Okay. What else can you add?
Bacteria.
So I'm looking at your, pay attention to your oxygen level. Alright, so you have 2 minutes more. 1 minute more. Mhm. Okay. So tell me about your ecosystem.
Okay. So it has plants and algae that start to spread and take over the whole ecosystem that's
Mhm.
on the surface. And then there's bacteria to get rid of all the fish droppings and waste. And then the tiny fishes that's feeding on the plants.
So from looking at your ecosystem, do you think it's sustainable?
Yes.
You think it's sustainable?
With care, maintenance, yes, it's sustainable.
And what is needed for it to be sustainable?
A balance of the producers, consumers, and decomposers.
Okay. So during your spare time, you can continue to work on your ecosystem, right? Because if you notice, right, so if you notice, once there is an imbalance of organism in the ecosystem, what would happen?
Things start to die.
If there's an imbalance, what happens?
Things die, like the fishes.
Right, so the organisms, some of them that depends on the other organism to survive, if there isn't a balance and there isn't enough, what happens?
They die.
Right, so you start to get a decrease in that organism in the ecosystem, right? And right, so you also notice that in the ecosystem, what is also important, we also need to add what?
Bacteria.
Bacteria, right? Because the bacteria does what?
It decomposes the waste.
Okay, so now can you put it back to our slide so we can wrap up our lesson? All right, so today, what is the ecosystem that
Aquatic
we talk
ecosystem.
about, and what makes an ecosystem aquatic?
Water.
And what are the two types of aquatic ecosystem?
Saltwater ecosystem and freshwater ecosystem.
And what is the main difference between the freshwater ecosystem and the saltwater ecosystem?
Saltwater ecosystem has a high salt content, while freshwater ecosystem has a low salt content.
Okay, so how do plants and animals in an aquatic environment depend on each other?
Plants produce the food,
Mm-hmm.
and the animals depend on the plants for their food.
Next question. What would happen if one part of the aquatic ecosystem were removed?
The other organisms in the ecosystem would begin to die.
Okay, the one that depend on that part of the ecosystem that's removed, right? So would you call leaves from plants, like dry leaves, would you call that waste?
Yes.
Okay. So plant, you mentioned that plant produces waste. So we know that plant produces what?
Food.
Food, right? Plants are producers, so they produce food. But when the dry leaves fall, that is also considered as what?
Waste.
Waste, right? And what decompose those waste?
Bacteria.
Good. So to end our lesson, I would like you to complete this exit ticket, and we can also create an aquarium where we will have like our own aquatic ecosystem. So take a few minutes to complete your exit ticket. And once you're finished, that's the end of our science lesson for today.